Right? So many of these disputes are really about cases at the margin, and I at least am willing to adhere to my theory consistently, right? And not say, well, I like my theory in 5% of the cases, but I take originalism in the other 95%. Okay? Now, it's also true, of course, judges exercise discretion. Sometimes they have bad faith. They get it wrong. That's true of referees, too. We don't tell a basketball referee, well, we know that there are sometimes judgment calls and sometimes referees get it wrong, so just throw out the rule book and go decide whether there's a foul or not based on human dignity. Or we don't do that. We say, do the best you can to follow the rules. How much time do I have? I'm getting close. Okay, can I reserve the rest of my time for rebuttal? I think I have about 4 minutes. All right. Go ahead.
Back to William and Mary. It's the only law school in the country where I feel short, standing beside Alan and me. So thanks to everyone for coming. It's a beautiful afternoon, and you obviously have lots of other attractive options. As Dave Douglas mentioned, I was a visiting professor here in 1999. I had a great time. It's always fun to come back. It's fun to think about all the things that have happened. Not always fun to think about all the things that have happened in the 11 years since Alan and I first did this debate. The United States suffered the largest terrorist attack in history. The United States also elected the first African-American president in our history. 4 justices from the Supreme Court have retired or died, and they've been replaced by other justices. Perhaps most importantly, the Boston Red Sox have managed to break the curse when the World Series not once but twice. One of the great pleasures of coming to William & Mary is that I get to do this debate with Alan. We've been doing it now for 11 years. Alan gets thrashed every time, and he comes back for more. What can you say about such a person? Maybe Alan expects that one day he'll break the curse himself. Maybe it'll happen today, but I'm saying no. I'm going to start by
baseball.
I'm going to begin by surprising Alan a little bit, maybe the rest of you. I'm actually going to concede that originalism has some virtues, just like any other of the frequently embraced approaches to constitutional interpretation. I'm going to start by noting those virtues, then I'm going to note some of the countervailing vices that I think plague originalism, and then I'm going to explain why I think perhaps the vices outweigh the virtues. Indeed, I'm going to go further. I'm going to suggest to you that even the proponents of originalism implicitly concede that the virtues are outweighed by the vices because they're in fact not consistent in their embrace of originalism. When push comes to shove, and I'm not saying this is true of Alan, but it's true of the people who he lavishes praise on, like Justices Scalia and Thomas, when push comes to shove, most originalists give up on their originalism when it produces results that are sufficiently unattractive to them. To me, that implies that if originalism's proponents are not even committed to the theory, then why in the world should anybody else be? So let me start with 3 main virtues of originalism, and then I'll note the corresponding vices. First of all, and this is one that Alan, I think, especially emphasized, originalism constrains judges and in the process enhances democracy. Second, originalism promotes a kind of objectivity in decision making. It does this by ensuring that important decisions, and Alan alluded to this as well, although I don't think he emphasized it, it ensures that important decisions are made by people who are not aware of how those decisions will come and impact them personally. That's an attractive aspect of originalism. It allows for a certain dispassionate sort of decision-making where when you decide something really important, you don't immediately know what the consequences are for yourself. And third, originalism establishes continuity with the past and thus provides an important point of commonality for our extremely diverse society. So I'm going to take these up actually in reverse order. I'll say a little bit more about the virtue and then note the countervailing vice. All right, so starting with originalism and our common constitutional ancestry. Ours obviously is a society of newcomers. Originalism in a sense gives us a common past. We can all refer to Alexander Hamilton and James Madison and whichever other framers you admire as in a sense being our constitutional ancestors. And that's true wherever in fact our real ancestors came from, whenever they came to the United States, wherever they came from. So this virtue is arguably especially important in a society like ours, which is characterized by such ethnic, racial, and religious diversity. It's important for us to have a common focal point, and perhaps originalism provides this. Now there are a couple offsetting vices here, and I don't think I'm probably telling most of you anything you don't already know. Our common constitutional ancestry has a seriously exclusionary aspect to it. At the time of the founding, blacks, women, Catholics, Jews, poor people were not considered full parts of the political community. In some cases, they were not even considered partial members of the political community. Most famously, African Americans in 1787 in the United States were mostly enslaved. The Constitution recognizes and legitimizes that slave status. As you probably know, women nowhere in the United States exercised the right to vote in 1787. So from some people's perspective, this common constitutional ancestry has the significant vice of tying us to a past situation, a past document in which these people were not treated as full citizens. Indeed, in the case of African Americans, not even treated as full human beings. This is exclusionary, and I think pretty difficult to justify to these people why they should show some sort of reverence to this document that excluded them, denied their personhood. Second criticism, there's an obvious trade-off here between the virtue of establishing a common constitutional ancestry with the past and the vice of depriving ourselves, meaning today's generation, of full control over our political decision-making. There are obviously good things about what Madison and Hamilton tried to do in the Constitution, but they also made lots of bad choices, slavery only being the most notorious example of one such bad choice. We can certainly make better decisions today if we put our minds to it. Why should we simply pay blind obeisance to the past when there's so many things they did that strike us as obviously wrong? Okay, so moving on to the second ostensible virtue of originalism, and I shouldn't use the word ostensible. There is a real virtue here. I think they're just countervailing vices that I think perhaps outweigh it. Here the idea is we get a nice decision-making context when we're somehow insulated from the consequences of our own decisions. The idea here is that bad decisions result when people who are making those decisions realize what the impact will be on themselves. For those of you with a background in political or moral philosophy, this is the principal insight, I believe, that drives Rawls's notion of the original position and the veil of ignorance. So take a quick example to illustrate the virtue of originalism in this guise. Consider the impeachment context. Now, I realize the impeachment context was highly salient when Alan and I first did this debate in 1999. Apparently I'm too lazy to redo my notes. I promise you, if Alan wins the debate, I will start over from scratch, and next time I'll have a completely new set of notes. Now, I think this is actually, I'm here just going to glom on to something Alan said and basically agree with him. So think about the context of impeachment, and the question is, what's the decision rule for the Senate when it's deciding whether to remove Bill Clinton from office? Suppose the Constitution didn't explicitly say, if you want to remove a federal office holder through impeachment, you need a 2/3 vote in the Senate. Right? Well, this would be a disaster. Can you really imagine Democrats and Republicans in the Senate who today can't even agree on what the time of day is? Can you imagine them trying to agree on what the decision rules should be for impeachment, knowing the consequence this would have on whether Bill Clinton should be removed from office? The Republicans, to refresh your memory, had a majority in 1999. They did not have a supermajority. Right? One virtue, a significant virtue of the Constitution, is that it resolves these issues in advance before we know how the particular context will influence the way the decision is made. All right, so that's a real virtue, but it would be foolish at the same time not to recognize the corresponding vices. First of all, decisions that are made in the absence of knowledge about concrete consequences can't possibly take account of changed circumstances. The world has changed immeasurably since 1787 when the Constitution was written. I'll say a few more words about that a couple minutes down the road. For now, though, just note the fact that decisions that are made in advance, it's, I think, impossible for them to take account of important changed circumstances. Second, and this is a slightly different point, decisions made in advance can't benefit from the insights gained from experience. Perhaps a particular constitutional rule doesn't work out very well in practice. The framers can't possibly have known that because they were just putting the rule into operation for the first time. For example, the electoral college system of electing a president turned out to be a disaster, producing the debacle of